My girlfriend cheated on me with her Spanish tutor and got pregnant with him, lying to me that the child was really mine. I've been with my girlfriend for a couple of years now, and things were solid. We had a good rhythm going. Dates, late-night talks, the usual stuff that makes you feel like you finally found someone real. I've always been careful about who I let into my life. Growing up, I had money, and it sucked watching girls pretend to care just to get a piece of it. I got burned a few times, so I learned to spot the red flags. But she was different. She didn't care about my bank account, or what I could buy her. It felt like she was with me because she actually liked me, not my wallet. That's rare, and I wasn't about to mess it up. We had a plan, no kids until marriage. It wasn't some big moral thing, it just made sense. I wasn't ready to be a dad, and she always said she felt the same. I'd been thinking about proposing lately though. Not rushing it, just letting the idea simmer. I wanted to be sure. Then, out of nowhere, she tells me she's pregnant. It hit me like a truck. We were careful, always used protection, no slip-ups. I didn't get how it happened. She said it must have been a fluke, one of those one-in-a-million chances. I didn't know what to think, but I figured accidents happen. Still, it was weird. Really weird. The pregnancy threw everything off. I wasn't ready for this, but now it was here. I started thinking I had to step up, marry her sooner than I'd planned. It's not what I wanted yet, but with a kid on the way, it felt like the right thing to do. She seemed happy about it, at least at first. Said she was excited to start a family with me. I tried to match her energy, even though I was still processing it all. Deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. But I pushed it aside. We were in this together now, whether I'd signed up for it or not. After the pregnancy news settled in, things with her started shifting. At first, I thought it was just me overthinking stuff. She was still the same girl I'd fallen for, but now there was this edge to her I couldn't place. She got paranoid, like really paranoid. Every time she left the house, she'd give me these long explanations about where she was going and why. Grocery store, doctor's appointments, whatever, it was always this detailed rundown. I didn't ask for it, but she'd lay it all out like she needed to prove something. It was odd because she never used to do that. I started wondering why she felt the need to justify every move. Then it flipped. She wasn't just paranoid about herself, she got paranoid about me too. If I was out longer than usual, she'd text me nonstop, asking where I was, who I was with, what I was doing. I'd tell her I was just grabbing a beer with a friend, and she'd grill me about it. She'd never been jealous before, not even close. Now it was like she didn't trust me to step out the door. I didn't get it. I wasn't the one acting shady, she was. But I didn't call her out. I figured it was the pregnancy messing with her head. Hormones, stress, all that stuff. I'd heard it could make people act weird. It was exhausting though. I'd come home from work, and instead of relaxing, I'd be stuck reassuring her I wasn't sneaking around. Meanwhile, she'd vanish for hours and come back with some overly detailed story about her day. I wanted to believe her. I told myself this was temporary, that once the baby came, she'd chill out. But the more it went on, the more it wore me down. I loved her, so I kept my mouth shut and tried to ride it out. Still, that nagging feeling from before, it was growing. The months of her pregnancy felt like they lasted forever. Every day was the same exhausting cycle. She'd go out, come back with her long-winded excuses, and then turn around and demand to know every detail of my day. I couldn't keep up. I'd try to ask her simple stuff, like how she was feeling or what the doctor said, and she'd snap at me, saying I was prying too much. It didn't make sense. I was just trying to stay involved, but she acted like I was accusing her of something. I started keeping my questions to myself after a while. It was easier that way. I kept telling myself it was the pregnancy. People warned me about this kind of thing, mood swings, irrational behavior. I'd nod and agree when my buddies said their wives got weird when they were pregnant too. It helped me feel less alone in it. But her paranoia wasn't just mood swings. It was consistent, like she was hiding something and overcompensating to keep me off her trail. I'd catch her staring at her phone, texting someone, then locking it fast when I walked by. She'd say it was her mom or a friend, but it happened too often. I didn't have proof of anything, so I let it go. We got married during this mess. It wasn't the wedding I'd pictured, just a quick thing at the courthouse because of the baby. I wanted to do right by her and the kid, even if the timing sucked. She seemed relieved after the papers were signed, like it locked something in place for her. I thought it might calm her down, but it didn't. If anything, she got worse. I was drained, counting down the days until the baby arrived, hoping it'd fix things. That's what I clung to, hope that this was all temporary. The day she gave birth was a blur. We'd been up all night, her in labor, me pacing the hospital room, trying to be supportive. When the baby finally came, I felt this rush of relief. Not just because the pregnancy was over, but because I thought it might reset everything. She was a mom now, and I was a dad, or so I thought. The nurses handed me this tiny kid, wrapped in a blanket, and I looked down at him. Dark hair, dark eyes. I don't know what I expected, but something about him didn't click. I brushed it off fast. Babies change a lot, right? They don't come out looking exactly like you. She was exhausted after the delivery, sleeping most of the time, so I spent a lot of those first hours just holding him. I started getting attached. He'd grip my finger, and I'd think about all the stuff I wanted to teach him. How to throw a ball, how to drive, all that dad crap. It was the first time in months I felt hopeful. She woke up, saw me with him, and smiled. For a second, it was like the old her was back. I told myself the paranoia, the fights, the weirdness, it was all behind us now. We were a family. But that nagging feeling didn't go away. I'd look at him and then at her, and my brain would start picking at things. Her behavior during the pregnancy, the way she dodged questions about her appointments, the phone stuff, it all crept back in. I didn't want to ruin the moment, so I pushed it down. I'd spent months convincing myself she was just stressed, and I wasn't about to let my head mess up this new start. Still, it was there, quiet but persistent, like a splinter I couldn't pull out. The first few weeks with the baby were chaotic. Sleepless nights, diaper changes, her recovering from the birth, it was a lot. I was running on fumes, but I kept going because I wanted to be there for him. I'd hold him when she needed a break, feed him, rock him to sleep. The more time I spent with him, the more I loved him. But that splinter in my head wouldn't leave. Every time I looked at him, I'd notice little things. His eyes were darker than mine or hers. His hair didn't match either of us. I told myself it didn't mean anything, genetics are random, and I'm no expert. Her behavior didn't help. She was still paranoid, but now it was about the baby. She'd hover over me when I held him, asking what I was doing, like I'd screw it up. If I left the room with him, she'd follow a minute later to check. It wasn't protective mom stuff, it felt like she didn't trust me with him. I started replaying the last 9 months in my head. The way she'd disappear for hours, always with some excuse. The Spanish lessons she'd been taking, or said she was taking. She'd stopped mentioning them months ago, but I never thought much of it. Now it stuck out. I didn't want to believe anything bad. I'd married her, built this life with her, and now we had a kid. Doubting her felt like doubting everything. But the pieces weren't fitting. I'd catch her staring at him sometimes, this weird look on her face, like guilt or fear. I couldn't shake it. It was eating at me, but I didn't have proof. Just a gut feeling that kept getting louder. I tried focusing on the good, the family we were supposed to be, but it wasn't enough anymore. I couldn't keep ignoring it. The doubts were there every day now, louder every time I looked at him. I loved that kid, loved him like he was mine, but I needed to know. It wasn't about not wanting him, it was about the truth. I'd spent months swallowing her excuses, brushing off her paranoia, telling myself it was all in my head. But it wasn't. I had to be sure. So one night, while she was feeding him, I brought it up. I kept it light, casual. Said we should do a DNA test, just for fun, to see what traits he got from me. I smiled, acted like it was no big deal. She flipped out. Went from calm to screaming in seconds. Said I didn't trust her, that I was accusing her of something awful right after she'd given birth. She cried, yelled about how I was trying to abandon her, and the baby. I was stunned. I didn't expect that reaction. I tried to explain, it wasn't about distrust, just curiosity, but she wouldn't hear it. She stormed off with him, locked herself in the bedroom. I stood there, alone in the living room, trying to figure out what just happened. Her meltdown made it worse. If she had nothing to hide, why get so defensive? That night I couldn't sleep. Her words kept replaying, how I wanted to abandon them. It didn't make sense. If he was mine, why would I leave? That's when it hit me, maybe she knew something I didn't. Her reaction wasn't just anger, it was panic. I sat there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and decided I couldn't let it go. I had to know for sure, even if she wouldn't agree. I'd do the test myself. It felt wrong, going behind her back, but I was out of options. I didn't waste time after that night. I ordered a DNA test kit online, discreet shipping, no questions asked. It came a few days later, and I waited until she was out of the house. She'd started leaving again, saying she had errands or needed air. I didn't buy it anymore, but it gave me a window. I swabbed his cheek while he slept, then my own. Sent it off and waited. Those 2 weeks were hell. I'd hold him, play with him, and wonder if I was about to lose everything. I didn't tell her. Couldn't risk another blow-up, or worse, her taking him and running before I got answers. The results came in an email. I opened it alone, hands shaking. Not a match. He wasn't mine. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling my chest cave in. All the months of doubt, the excuses I'd made for her, it crashed down. I wasn't his dad. I printed the results, folded them into my pocket, and waited for her to get home. When she walked in, I didn't beat around it. I asked her straight, "Who's the father?" She froze, eyes wide, like she knew this was coming. Then she broke down. Tears, sobbing the works. Said it was her Spanish tutor. She hadn't been going to lessons for months, just his place. I couldn't process it at first. She cheated, gotten pregnant, and lied to my face the whole time. Made me think he was mine, married me under that lie. I asked how long it had been going on. She said it started a year ago, before the pregnancy. They'd been hooking up whenever she could sneak away. I felt sick. The room spun. I'd built my life around her, around him, and it was all fake. She begged me to stay, but I couldn't even look at her. I left the house that night. Couldn't stay there with her crying and him sleeping in the next room. I grabbed my keys, walked out, and drove to a buddy's place. Didn't tell her where I was going, didn't owe her that. My head was a mess. I kept seeing his face, those dark eyes I'd spent months staring into, thinking he was mine. I loved him. Still do, even now. But he wasn't my kid, and she wasn't the person I thought she was. I crashed on my friend's couch, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how I'd missed it. All the signs were there, her paranoia, the disappearing, the tutor excuse. I'd just been too dumb to see it. The next day, I went back to get some stuff. She was there, holding him, looking like she hadn't slept. She tried talking, said she was sorry, that she didn't mean for it to happen, that she still loved me. I didn't buy it. If she loved me, she wouldn't have slept with some guy for a year and passed his kid off as mine. I packed a bag, told her I'd figure out the legal stuff later. Divorce was coming. I just didn't have the energy to start it yet. She asked about him, what I'd do about him. I didn't have an answer. He wasn't mine, but walking away from him hurt worse than leaving her. I've been at my friend's place since. Can't go back to that house without seeing them both. I keep thinking about the last year, how she played me, how I fell for it. I picked her because I thought she was real, not like the others who just wanted my money. Turns out she was worse. She didn't just take my cash, she took my trust, my future, everything. It's been a few weeks since I walked out. I'm still at my friend's place, sleeping on his couch, trying to piece my life back together. The divorce papers are in motion. Hired a lawyer, got the ball rolling. She didn't fight it. Probably knows she's got no ground to stand on after what she did. I haven't seen her or the kids since that day I grabbed my stuff. Hurts too much to think about him. I keep picturing his face, those little hands grabbing at me, and it kills me that he's not mine. I wanted to be his dad. Still do, in some messed up way. But I can't raise someone else's kid, not like this, not after the lie. I found out more about the tutor. Dug around online, asked some mutual friends who didn't know the whole story. Guy's a sleaze, older, teaches on the side, has a reputation for hitting on students. She's still with him, I think. Don't know for sure, don't care enough to check. My buddies keep telling me I dodged a bullet, that I'm better off without her. They're right, but it doesn't feel like it yet. I trusted her, built everything around her, and she torched it. I'm back to square one, picking up the pieces, figuring out who I am without them. I'm done with relationships for now. Too many times I've been burned, first by girls after my money, now by her. I thought she was different, but I was wrong. I'll get through this, eventually. Got my job, my friends, a lawyer sorting out the mess. The kid's the hardest part to let go of, but I have to. He's not mine, and she made that choice for me. Life goes on, I guess. Just wish it didn't hurt so damn much.